So this lecture is designed to talk a little bit about how to formulate and organize outlines, fine-tuning them to get toward where we want to go for the persuasive speech. Some of the consistent themes that I noticed in the outlines for the informative speech are making sure to cite your sources properly and every time, making sure to write so that way each line is a complete sentence, and making sure to follow the rule of two. So with that example, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you an example from a previous semester, an effective outline. I'm going to talk about what it is that I'm looking for, why we do that, so we understand the background of it. It's not just a matter of I want you to do this, therefore you should do it, but it's a reason why. So we're going to go through an example from a previous speech, a previous outline about texting and driving. So this example here, oops, sorry, let me share my screen. So this example here is from a previous semester, and it has a lot of the same elements. The major element that's going to be different, there's a different philosophy at Wayne State as at MCC for the thesis statement. So that's why there's the major difference there, but the rest of it is set up fairly similarly. So here we have a persuasive argument, persuasive, the specific purpose here to persuade my peers to not text and drive, direct and to the point. Notice here that there's just one idea. Even though the word and is here, the idea is text and drive. And so the persuasion is to not text and drive. So make sure you just have one specific purpose statement. Now they also have their thesis set up here. Like I said, the thesis and the preview statement for this semester as well as for our current semester are a little bit different. So don't look at this as word for word, this is what you should be doing, the notion of what it should look like. You're not required to have this up here, but they do establish it pretty early on. They clearly identify the introduction. You have the attention getter. What it is they're talking about clearly relates to texting and driving as far as this is what she's going to be talking about in her speech. She establishes her credibility by talking about her research. Notice here one of the consistent things that I noticed in your speech as well as in your outlines is that just because you're interested in it or just because you've seen it happen does not make you an expert, or at least for the purpose of this. Doing the research makes you an expert. Doing a research establishes that expertise. You're not just someone who's interested in doing something, you're someone who has expertise in this. Make sure to establish that credibility. We have the audience relevant statement, making that clear connection. And then to have the what is essentially a preview statement, but also doubled as the thesis statement for this speech. So the preview statement, texting and driving is dangerous. US and other countries are doing to prevent the problem, how to be responsible with your phone. Clearly establishes what it is that they're going to be talking about. And they transition. Notice here that they're writing these sentences as if they were saying them. Not writing them as, even though you are inherently answering those questions that I posed for the audience relevance, where it's why should the audience care? Credibility, why should the audience listen to you? You're writing these out as these sentences. Make sure we move toward the transition. Clearly looking at your phone, looking at danger, and then talking about dangerous. Uses those same words. Notice here in this main point one, she uses the word dangerous. And then in main point one of the body, she uses the word dangerous. It's important to use those same words. Remember our favorite phrase. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Got to use the same words. And she breaks it down here, main points and subpoints. So we have a main point with A, a main point with 1, and then subpoint with A, subpoint with B. She has sub-subpoints. Remember the rule of 2. For every subpoint, you need to have a sub-subpoint. For every main point, you need to have a second main point. For every sub-subpoint, a second sub-subpoint, and so on and so forth. You're not required to have sub-subpoints, but if you are, you need to break those down. One of the other important things that she does is that each line is one complete sentence. That's an important aspect. An outline is an outline. It's not an essay. You're not writing out paragraphs. Each line is one complete sentence, unless she uses a quote or information from a source. So in this case, this was supposed to have been quotation marks, but that's a quote that she's using. So breaking out each line is one complete sentence. Make sure to have that in your outline as well. Also citing her sources. Every time she brings in information, every single time, every single sentence that brings in outside information, she cites it. And that's what you need to do too. This is the primary way I'm grading you for your citations. The reason why we cite is twofold in an outline. One is to give credit where credit is due. That's the most important part. Making sure to recognize that someone else had this idea and you're using that idea. And using that idea is fine. You're recognizing that someone else had that idea. 2 is so that way I know where to look and any of your readers will know where to look in the references page. So we have Haas here 2012. If we look down on the references page, we have Haas here 2012. Exactly where it is, I can go to this website and find that source. So that's what's important there as well. So we continue on with this example, noticing that it's breaking down this information. She brings in a second citation here, talking about information in the UK and other countries. She uses information from insurance companies. So using different forms of research as well. So even when she says the Allstate blog, she still has, which is a fine citation here, she still has another citation here. So she's gotten her 5 citations already and using citations appropriately. Secondly, she continues to build out these main points. She has a clear main point 2. She transitions. She talks about what other countries in the US are doing to ban texting and driving, which was their second main point up here. The US and other countries are doing to prevent the problem. And here she has clear language saying, here's what they're doing to prevent the problem, to ban texting while driving, using that same language. That's what's important. She's identifying these things. She's providing her sources. She's providing information to support her arguments. That's what's important there too. Making sure to cite her sources. Same thing with the third main point, being responsible with your cell phone. Should link back to the preview, which is how to be responsible with your cell phone. So being consistent here, using that same language. It's not a notion of repetitiveness for repetitiveness' sake. It's to continue to reinforce that idea into your audience's head. And then she brings her a transition. Now she has her conclusion, clearly restating the main points that she has and then leaving with a good impression. Now for the persuasive speech, leaving it with a good impression is a little bit easier because there's an action plan. Most persuasive speeches deal with action, something the audience can do. And that's what you want to have for the wow statement or the clincher as well. So she ended the speech effectively. This outline received high marks because the structure was strong. The outline was formatted correctly. 1 sentence per line. She clearly cited her sources. She had a clear preview statement, a clear specific purpose statement. She had a clear audience relevance, attention getter, credibility statement. She clearly had main points that were supported. These aren't surprises. This is on the evaluation sheet that I showed you on Blackboard as well as what you can see. And so it's important for you not just to write this because I want this the way it is, because this is an effective way to write a preparation outline. I'm going to have it so that way each line is a complete sentence, each line is consistent, you're actually supporting whatever it is that you are doing. Then we have the references page here. This is an effective references page. Now this is an older version of APA style. This is essentially what I'm looking for. References centered in the middle of the page on a new page. This doesn't say works cited. This doesn't say bibliography. This doesn't say cited sources. This says references. That's APA format. In alphabetical order by last name. Knowing what it is that you were looking at, where you got that information, where you retrieved it from if it's an online source. So being consistent here, using Purdue APA will help you. Be consistent in your APA formatting. It's also the reason why I have you do the outline rough draft. That way you can get feedback on what it is that you are doing. So that's what I'm looking for in an outline. I'm looking for consistency. I'm looking for properly cited sources. It's extremely important to cite your sources. I'm not asking you to be an expert in APA, but you need to cite your sources. It's a big thing that I'm looking for. You need to make sure that you have complete sentences and that each line is just one complete sentence. Making sure to have the elements of the outline that you need to have. So as you develop your persuasive speech and your persuasive outline, make sure to hit these formatting things. You can see exactly what it is that I'm going to be using to grade you under the persuasive outline assignment in Blackboard. So be aware of that. This isn't a surprise. When it comes to the outline for the informative speech, generally the scores were low. It's consistent. Most of it was because of poor citations, if any citations, in formatting. Also making sure to have a clear thesis statement. So making sure that differentiates between the thesis statement and the preview statement. Also making sure that when you have that credibility that you need to establish what makes you an expert, what makes you actually knowledgeable on this source, and how does this actually connect to your audience. Making sure to really hit those. Look back on your notes, look back on what it is that we have talked about, because we spent a lot of time talking about these elements. We spent a lot of time talking about thesis statements. We spent a lot of time talking about citations, and I want you to succeed. So making sure that you're looking back on those things. When it comes to the informative speech, you can turn that around. You can resubmit the informative outline. Excuse me, when it comes to the informative outline, you can turn it around. You can resubmit the informative outline by the end of the day on Friday, April 3rd. So that's 11:59 p.m. You're not required to. If you did well, I will grade it as if I'm grading it for the first time. So you can resubmit it and succeed there. That's due by the 11:59 p.m. through Blackboard. You'll submit it. I'll open up the submission for you to submit one more time. And that's anybody who submitted an outline. So if you didn't submit an outline, you can't get credit for it because you didn't submit it to begin with. But if you submitted it, didn't get high enough score that you like, or you know that you can do better, I want you to do better. Give you more feedback. Submit that by the end of the day. The question that I need you to answer on Blackboard under discussion board is, do you have access to Zoom? And the secondary question is, do you know how to use Zoom? I have office hours through Zoom for Wayne State University, and it's going to be easier and a more consistent format if you could have that as well. So if you have Zoom, which I know a lot of MCC classes are going to, it's going to be easier to do that for office hours rather than Google Hangouts. So those are the two questions I need you to answer. Do you have Zoom, and do you know how to use Zoom? So making sure to answer those in the discussion board. So make sure to get that there and ask any questions that you might have. This lecture is due, making sure to have those session board posts due up by the end of the day on April 2nd, which is a Thursday. Making sure to complete your homework, doing your chapter quizzes. The next lecture will be on celebratory speaking, and we're going to have a lecture on ethics and persuasion. The persuasion broad overview, discussion, argumentation, some fallacies discussion is already available on Blackboard under PowerPoint. If you don't have access to PowerPoint, Mont Community College, if you go to their tech suite, just Google kind of PowerPoint or Office 365. They have a free version with your MCC account, so you can get access to PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, Excel, those sorts of things. So making sure to be on the lookout for that. Please let me know if you have any questions. Remember that my office hours are here for you to come talk to me. You don't need to set up an appointment, but you will need to invite me or ask me through email to set up with you. So make sure you're asking any questions that you might have.